Imagine a 12-year-old boy named Hassan, a child who, on just another night, lost everything he had, and all that he knew crumbled in mere minutes. He watched his home go up in flames, saw his family's faces fade into the darkness of a war that, to him, was merely fear and noise. Forced to flee, he ran without understanding, without knowing where to look. He walked for days and nights, alone, until he reached a refugee camp. There, in a random corner surrounded by barbed wire, he believed he had found a safe place. But what he found was a new prison. Inside, Hassan discovered that the worst part of the war wasn't the sound of bombs, but the silence of hunger. Each day was a struggle, eating whatever volunteers gave him, sometimes a hard piece of bread, at times just a weary glance. In the quiet of the nights, amidst mosquitoes and the stench of sewage, he dreamt of his mother, of his brother. In his nightmares, they called out to him, and Hassan would wake up sweating, his voice caught in his throat, fear suffocating him. And you, can you imagine waking up every night screaming, with no one to hear you, no one to comfort you? For years, Hassan remained in that camp, with nothing but fragments of memory and deep solitude, until one day he found something in the trash. Small electronic parts, a piece of wire, something that might be repaired perhaps, or simply observed. With the little he knew, with trembling hands and a silent determination, he began to try. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he pushed forward, driven by a desire he couldn't even explain. There, amid the wreckage and remnants, Hassan built a small communication device. Would this be his way to speak to the world, to break the silence? And it was there, in that forgotten piece of land, that his message was picked up by someone very far away. Someone who, to the entire world, seemed unreachable. Elon Musk. Imagine the surprise of a man who had already explored space upon hearing the story of a boy from a refugee camp. What would he feel? What could he understand of that suffering? Moved by the pain and strength of that fractured voice, Elon Musk didn't just listen, he felt. And then he decided that he could not just observe from afar. Days later, in a moment that felt like a dream, Hassan saw a strange man coming from afar, crossing the camp. He was dressed differently, had a curious look, and asked for him. He came to rescue him, to take him away, to offer him a life Hassan didn't even know existed. And there, in a way that no one would understand, Elon Musk and Hassan met, connected by something that couldn't be described. What would it be like for a boy who lost everything to see someone coming from so far away just to save him, to offer a chance, a new beginning? Taken by Musk, Hassan crossed oceans, skies, and continents until he found himself in a world he could hardly imagine. Now, he was at Starlink, working on a communication project that promised to connect the world, to unite those who, like him, knew what it was like to live without a voice, without a way to be heard. And you, what would you do if you had such a chance? If you could help change someone's life with a simple act of courage? Hassan was now there, in front of screens and devices that blinked, shining with data from satellites traversing the sky. For a boy who had lived for so long between barbed wire and canvas tents, it was like touching another universe. He watched the maps form, imagining the number of unknown lives that could now be reached, connected. But there, in that new and modern environment, Hassan couldn't forget where he came from, nor the dark nights filled with silence and longing. His gaze, even in the face of those accomplishments, still carried something unfathomable, a void that perhaps would never fade. Each day alongside Musk, each project he worked on, Hassan wondered if it was all real. He wondered what his parents would think of him being there, a unique, almost unbelievable chance. But with it came responsibility. He felt the weight of the voices left behind, all those still waiting for a sign, a change. Deep down, he knew he wasn't there just for himself. His mission now was greater, and perhaps that was why Elon Musk was so interested in him. Not just because of the story, but because of the determination of someone who had never stopped fighting, even without any guarantee that the suffering would end. Hassan carried a piece of all those who still remained in camps, trapped, forgotten. He couldn't fail, because his voice wasn't just his. It was for all those still waiting for a chance to be heard. But was Hassan prepared to carry that weight? Could he be the hope for those who were left behind? And you, Would you be able to leave everything behind just to follow a dream, an ideal? Time passed, and Hassan adapted to the new environment. But something remained, an almost invisible discomfort, a feeling he could barely name. The world of Starlink was so vast, so different from everything he knew. He spent his days alongside engineers who spoke a technical, rapid language, something he absorbed in silence, like a sponge. Elon Musk watched closely as Hassan progressed, but he also maintained a calculated distance, always with incisive questions, as if he were trying to measure the depth of that young man, what truly lay within him. As weeks went by, Hassan began to realize that his role in the project was much more than just operational. Elon entrusted him with the company's secrets, confidences that echoed in his mind on some nights like a new responsibility. One afternoon, seeing the boy tinkering with one of the antennas, Musk approached him with that look that was half curiosity, half mystery. "Do you understand what we're trying to do here, Hassan?" Musk asked straightforwardly. Hassan hesitated. He knew what he had been told, that Starlink aimed to connect the world, to reach the most remote corners, the most isolated places. But Musk seemed to expect a response that went beyond that, a comprehension that Hassan still wasn't sure he possessed. "I think so, Mr. Musk, but sometimes I feel like I don't understand everything. It's like there's something bigger, something I'm not seeing." The sincerity in Hassan's voice seemed to please Musk, who smiled wryly, enigmatically. It was then that Musk, with an unsettling calm, revealed something Hassan could never have imagined. He crouched down, looking Hassan in the eyes, and said in a low voice, as if someone might be listening, "There's something that few people know about our network, Hassan. It's not just about communication. Some of the satellites are being programmed to collect data from conflict zones, places where human presence isn't possible, but the real goal goes beyond that. There's a project we've been working on for years, but that few know about." Hassan's heart raced. Conflict zones. He knew well what it meant to grow up in a place where human presence was impossible, where the world's eyes didn't reach. That revelation seemed to shake his own memories, making buried questions surface, each more disturbing than the last. "Mr. Musk, what exactly do you mean by collecting data?" Musk sighed, gazing toward the horizon as if searching for the right words. "Hassan, think of everything you've lived through, everything you've seen, and imagine if there were a way to predict these conflicts, a system that could anticipate these tragedies and perhaps even prevent them. We are, little by little, building that possibility." Musk's words penetrated deeply, leaving Hassan speechless. He tried to imagine what that meant, tried to see beyond what Musk was saying, but something within him held back, preventing tragedies, anticipating wars. There was something much larger, much more complex there, something he couldn't fully access. And it was in that moment that he remembered something. One night, still in the refugee camp, when a strange communication emerged from one of the makeshift transmitters he had created. The sound was intermittent, fragmented, but Hassan was sure he caught words in a foreign language, a short message talking about military movement. At the time, he thought it was just a mistake, something unimportant. But now, hearing Musk speak, an unsettling suspicion formed in his mind. With a voice almost inaudible, Hassan asked, "Has this system been tested?" Musk hesitated for a moment, but that brief silence was enough for Hassan to understand what he needed. He already knew the answer before he heard it. "Let's just say that in some places it's already active." Musk chose his words carefully, but Hassan sensed something more, a sadness, perhaps even guilt, hidden in each syllable. That night, Hassan couldn't sleep. The thought that there might already be some kind of presence, a greater control over the fate of so many lives, something that could have prevented his own tragedy, was devastating. Would he still have his family if this system had existed before? Would the faces that haunted his nightmares somehow still be alive? It was an unanswerable question, but the doubt gnawed at him like a wound that never healed. He returned to work in the following days, but now, every time he touched an antenna, every time he adjusted a signal, he felt different, as if he were part of something much larger, something he still didn't know if he believed in. He watched Musk with new eyes, trying to read between the lines, searching for any clue that could explain what was really happening. The weight of that new responsibility was almost unbearable. Was Musk right? Could he really change the course of a war? Or was he facing something too dangerous, a manipulation that went beyond human control? But Hassan couldn't escape. He had been chosen for this mission, and now he needed to decide if he wanted to continue. Between moving forward or giving up, there was only one right path. But what to do when even the right choice feels wrong? In the days that followed, Hassan felt as if an invisible weight rested on his shoulders. Each time he entered the control room, where dozens of satellites transmitted data from all corners of the world, he was overwhelmed by a feeling he couldn't quite describe, something between fascination and fear. It was as if the room itself held secrets that were not yet ready to be revealed. The panels glowed with coded information, graphs he was beginning to understand, yet they also carried a mystery. Where, exactly, would all this information lead him? What really troubled him was the feeling that Musk was watching his movements with silent expectation, as if he were waiting for Hassan to comprehend something deeper, something no one dared to mention. Until one sweltering afternoon, while he adjusted one of the data reception parameters, Hassan noticed a real-time transmission, a restricted access code blinking discreetly. He couldn't resist. With a quick touch, he opened the transmission, pretending to check the details. That's when he saw something that made him freeze. On the screen, images of a remote village with empty streets and wooden houses were being transmitted by a high-resolution satellite. But it wasn't an ordinary village. The landscape was familiar, a place from his childhood, a village he knew well, the place where his family had lived before the war reached them. Hassan's heart beat like a drum, and he felt the blood drain from his face. It could only be a mistake, a coincidence, but it wasn't. With trembling hands, Hassan increased the image resolution, observing every detail. He saw the central square where he used to play with his brother, the market he visited with his mother. But something was off. There was military activity that made no sense. Soldiers were there, with armed vehicles, searching the deserted streets. They seemed to be looking for something, or someone. He tried, unsuccessfully, to block the fear that was rising in his chest. At that moment, Musk entered the room, approaching silently and observing the images on the screen. His presence behind Hassan felt like a physical weight. Hassan felt the air leave his lungs when he heard Musk's voice. "You recognize the place, don't you? I knew you'd figure it out eventually." Hassan turned around, confused, nausea washing over him. How did Musk know about this? How could he possibly know about the village? And more importantly, what did he have to do with what was happening there? Why? Why are they there? What are they doing? Hassan's voice trembled, a thread of desperation. Musk sighed, his gaze distant, as if he were carrying burdens too heavy to share. "It's what I was trying to tell you, Hassan. The Starlink network was designed to connect the world, yes, but to do that, some difficult choices were necessary. The place where your family lived is part of a study. We are monitoring conflict zones and trying to predict developments before they escalate to larger proportions. This project could, one day, save many lives, but we are still in experimental phases." Hassan swallowed hard, trying to process what Musk had said, but there was something more, something Musk wasn't revealing. He could feel it. There was a gap in the explanation that needed to be filled. With his breath caught, Hassan asked, "My family, did they know something? Are they?" Musk remained silent for a long moment, studying Hassan's face with an inscrutable look, as if deciding how far he could go. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "When your family was attacked, there was a mission. We needed to monitor certain targets in the region, and there was an error. The plan was to evacuate the families to avoid the combat zones, but something went wrong, and some transmissions were intercepted. Your village, Hassan, was in the path, but we couldn't get everyone out in time." The revelation hit Hassan like a blow. He was left speechless, the ground seeming to collapse beneath his feet. What Musk was saying was that somehow Starlink itself, that network he was helping to build, that promise of peace and connection, was involved in the disaster that claimed his family's lives. A mistake, a target that couldn't be diverted. That word echoed in his mind, leaving a bitter taste, a knot of anger and betrayal. Yet still, something in Musk's expression suggested there was more, something he still didn't dare to say. And you never told me? Hassan's voice was a whisper between shock and outrage. Musk lowered his gaze. I needed you to believe, Hassan. I needed you to see the potential of what we're building. It wasn't my intention to hide the truth, but if you had known earlier, maybe you would have never agreed to this. I almost gave up when I learned about the flaws. But then I thought about how many lives we could save, how we could prevent other suffering. And now I see that you are the key to this, because you understand the cost. You know what's at stake. Those words were a spark in a barrel of gunpowder. The hatred Hassan felt, mixed with a sense of helplessness, an internal struggle he never thought he would face. It was as if he were standing before a broken mirror, seeing fragments of himself, but unable to piece them together. On one hand, he wanted to destroy everything, to sever ties with the world that had taken everything from him. But on the other hand, Musk was right. He understood the cost. He knew what it meant to lose everything. And now he had a choice. If he stayed, he would have access to a system that could prevent other tragedies, that could somehow redeem what happened to his village, his family. But how could he trust Musk? How could he continue alongside someone who had used his pain to lead him here? And who else knew? Were there others? People who had also suffered, whose stories he still didn't know? Musk's gaze seemed to read the questions in Hassan's mind, but he said nothing in response. Instead, he placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and with a serious expression simply said, "Now, the decision is yours, Hassan. You can walk away, or you can stay and help change everything." That invitation sounded like a temptation, a promise and a threat all at once. Hassan felt as if he stood on the brink of something irreversible. Staying meant accepting the past and carrying it with him. Leaving, however, would mean abandoning an entire life without answers. Hassan looked at the images of his village one last time, memories he still carried like open wounds. He stood there, motionless, Musk's words echoing in his mind. He gazed at the frozen images of his village on the screen, details now etched in his memory. Musk's offer hung in the air like a poisonous promise. To stay and participate in something he barely understood, or to leave and live with uncertainty, forever haunted by this disturbing truth. That night, Hassan wandered the halls of Starlink in a heavy silence. Questions piled up in his mind, but something in his instinct held him back from confronting Musk again. He knew that the truth the CEO had shared was not complete. There was a part still hidden, a piece that Musk hadn't revealed and perhaps never would, and Hassan knew he would need to uncover it on his own. In the following nights, he began to quietly investigate the system's files. He delved into restricted directories, searching for any fragment that might lead him to answers. But Starlink was like a fortress, guarded by layers of security he couldn't breach. He persisted hour after hour until he finally stumbled across something peculiar, a coded directory, nameless, accessible only to certain employees. He tried to gain access, but the code was impenetrable. Then one night, an anonymous message appeared on his screen, as if someone had been watching him from afar. "It's not safe to ask questions here. Meet me outside." That made his blood run cold. Who else knew what he was searching for, and who was watching his every step? The next evening at dusk, he went to the meeting point indicated in the message, in a secluded corner of a city near the Starlink complex. He waited in the stillness of the night, alert to every sound, until a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, older, with deep-set eyes and a face marked by years of kept secrets. "You're Hassan, aren't you?" the man asked in a rough, cautious tone. "I've worked with Musk for a long time, but I need to tell you something he will never admit, something he has hidden from all of us." Hassan's curiosity was overwhelming, but he waited, fists clenched, listening to what the man had to say. "Have you ever wondered why Musk chose you among so many others?" The question seemed obvious, but Hassan didn't respond. "It's because he saw something in you that was different." But beyond that, Hassan, Starlink is involved in a secret research, far beyond communication. It's a study on what they call mass behavior. They use data from satellites to predict and in some cases stimulate certain reactions in conflict zones. Those words felt like knives. Stimulating conflicts, what was this man saying? When I say stimulate, I don't mean they caused the wars, Hassan, but they monitored events, fueled certain currents of information. They observe, manipulate data, sometimes to see how far human limits can stretch, to understand how people react to fear, to despair. Hassan's mind was spinning. He was trying to absorb the revelation, but part of him rejected it, refusing to believe. Starlink had not only observed, but had used tragedies as an experiment, and he, Hassan, was now a part of this. But why? Why would they do this? His voice was a thread of indignation. The man sighed, casting a heavy look at him. Because Musk believes that this research, this monitoring system, is the first step toward lasting peace. He wants to control peace, Hassan. He wants to manipulate the forces to create balance. But the price is high, and few can carry that burden. Hassan took a step back, feeling the weight of the revelation crush him. He finally understood that his family had not merely been victims of war. They were part of a hidden study, a strategy to understand how human despair unfolds, how people survive or do not collapse. What was this? He was facing a Machiavellian scheme, something that contradicted everything he believed about Musk, about Starlink itself. Returning to the complex that night, Hassan felt as though his soul was shattered. He didn't know what to do, whom to trust, whether he should stay there. He thought about confronting Musk, but fear paralyzed him. What if Musk was indeed controlling everything, watching each step, every movement of his? Days later, while going through a routine in the system, Hassan noticed something else unsettling. He had received permission from Musk to access a restricted part of the directory. There, he found a recent monitoring report, but when he opened the document, he felt his heart race uncontrollably. It contained data about a region where a new conflict was about to erupt. He read the details, trying to process the information. Starlink was monitoring troop movements, civilian migrations, local reactions to military presence, and even more shocking, there was a prediction, 70% chance of mass violence in the next 48 hours. Hassan saw there, in cold letters, the confirmation of what the man had told him. Starlink was watching everything, waiting for an explosion of conflict, but there were no plans for intervention, no actions to avert disaster. This was a study, an experiment. He felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. That same night, he tried to access the communication center directly to understand what Starlink planned to do with that information. But while hacking into the system, he encountered a final security barrier, a simple message in Musk's name stating, "Sacrifices are inevitable. Some truths are too bitter to reveal." Hassan shut down the computer, his chest tight, unsure of what it meant. Did Musk know the cruelty of the actions his company was taking, or was he lost in his own ideal, blinded by a distorted vision of peace? Hassan now understood that the truth about Starlink went far beyond simple connections. It was a network that could decide who lives and who dies, where peace would reign and where chaos would become inevitable. But there was something more, a final doubt that haunted him. The man he had met, the stranger who had revealed the secrets to him, had said that Musk had chosen him for a special reason, something unique. Hassan felt that there was a truth hidden even in that explanation. Hassan's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had spent sleepless nights, his eyes burning under the cold light of the screens, trying to decipher the secrets of Starlink and Musk's motives. All the dark truths he had discovered weighed on his chest like stones, making the mission of bringing peace to the world almost unbearable, bitter. After all, who could bring peace while secretly manipulating lives? And where did he, Hassan, fit into all of this? But it was the next morning that he found something that would change everything, or at least his understanding of everything around him. In a final access to restricted data, Hassan located a document that contained his own name, a detailed file of his entire life, his childhood, the attack on the village, the years in the refugee camp, up to the exact moment Musk became aware of his existence, when he had improvised that communication device. Upon opening the document, a wave of shock coursed through his body. There was something there that paralyzed him, a note in small letters at the end of the file, experimental monitoring. Hassan, subject E9. Further down, a brief comment. Confirmed, genetically compatible for extreme emotional variables. Hassan felt a chill run down his spine. Genetically compatible, extreme emotional variables. Those words were as disconcerting as they were disturbing, a cold, technical description of something he did not fully understand. Subject E9. He looked incredulous, feeling that his own life was a piece in a much larger machine, a part of something he had never imagined. But why? He needed answers. The next morning, he confronted Musk, his heart racing, fists clenched. Musk was in his office watching a control panel as Hassan approached with a determined look amid a contained fury. "What am I, Musk? What does subject E9 mean? Why did you need me specifically?" The questions exploded at once, in a tense and bitter voice. Musk remained silent for a long moment, but Hassan saw a change in his expression, a shadow that rarely appeared on his face. Finally, Musk looked at him, his gaze tired and almost human. "Hassan, there's something you don't know about our project. There are certain experiments, studies we conduct that seek to understand human resilience in extreme situations. And you, in a way, were born for this role. Your profile, your story, all of it makes you capable of enduring pressures that would destroy anyone else." Those words hung between them like an abyss. Hassan felt the rage rising within him, mixed with a kind of horror. Had he been chosen to bear the pain, the loss, the trauma, from the very beginning? Musk continued, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But now, Hassan, you have a choice. You can go on with this, understand that your experience can save millions, or you can leave, knowing that everything you've learned will remain in the shadows." The choice seemed simple, yet it was laden with unbearable weight. Staying meant becoming part of something Hassan despised, a system that manipulated lives and used people like him for its experiments. But what if Musk was right? What if his experience, his pain, could truly be a tool to save others? The silence stretched on, and Musk finally stepped back, leaving Hassan alone in that cold, bright room. He knew there would be no more answers. Everything was now within him. Hassan turned, feeling torn between fury and fear. Subject E9, a number, a study. Was he just that to Starlink, an experiment? As he left the building, a troubling thought emerged in his mind. Did he really have a choice? Hassan walked out into the cold night, the weight of the truth pulsing in his chest. Everything he had lived through, everything he had endured, the loss, the isolation, the fear, was not just a series of random tragedies. He had been monitored, chosen, catalogued as a subject. And worse, those moments that had marked his life, that had destroyed everything he knew, were, on some level, provoked or at least observed by Starlink. Wandering aimlessly in the hours that followed, he tried to digest the revelations. He remembered the nights he spent awake, imagining the lives of other children, of entire families trapped in camps like the one he knew so well. All those memories, every face he had seen during those terrible years, now took on a different dimension. How many of those lives had been observed, perhaps even sacrificed for Musk's vision? The idea was absurd, yet as real as the ground beneath his feet. Hassan needed to understand one last thing. He returned to the building, entered the control center once more, and activated the terminal. There was a directory he hadn't yet attempted to access, reserved for Musk, protected by one last layer of security. He used everything he knew, and after several attempts, managed to unlock it. What he found, however, left him even more torn. There, amid strategic documents and confidential reports, was a video. The date matched the time when he had created that makeshift device, years ago. Hassan took a deep breath and hit play. The video showed Musk, sitting in front of a camera, his face marked by fatigue. He spoke directly, as if having a conversation with someone close. "If you're seeing this, it means we succeeded," Musk said. "The person we found, the subject E9, he survived. He has something the world needs, a capacity to see hope where others see only darkness. But for him, this will be a burden, something he may never fully understand. I just hope that in the end, he can see that this isn't about control or power. It's about survival. Our survival. The screen went dark, and Hassan stood there, silent. Musk's words hit him deeply, as if there were a dark logic in what he'd heard. Musk seemed to believe that Hassan's fate was intertwined with the future of millions, a connection that Hassan didn't fully grasp. Yet somehow he felt part of something larger, as if every loss, every pain, every sacrifice in his life had been orchestrated to lead him here. Hassan deleted the video and looked out the window, where the city lights twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the drama unfolding in his heart. He felt Musk's presence like a shadow, something that would never leave him. Everything inside him screamed to leave, to abandon that project, that insane mission. But something else, something he could barely name, called him to stay. He knew the decision wouldn't be simple. He knew that whatever path he chose would change him forever. Musk's vision was steeped in sacrifice, in a dark faith in a controlled, monitored world. Would Hassan be able to live with that? Or perhaps he was the only chance to bring a different truth to Starlink. Before making any decision, he knew he needed one last confrontation, one final conversation. Because deep down, Hassan sensed there was something more, a secret that Musk still concealed, a reason that went beyond any explanation he had been given so far. The greatest secret of all was still hidden. Before you go, don't forget to watch the video that now appears on the screen. In it, you'll discover one of the most powerful and emotional moments of Elon Musk, a mystery that challenges science and strengthens the faith of millions. Click now and dive deeper into the miracles that have marked the life of this visionary. And remember, there is so much more to be uncovered. The greatest secret of all is yet to come.